Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. And as always, we're going to start with a very brief reflection. At these quiet moments when I'm not in a lot of physical activity and just sitting peacefully. It's like catching the breath inside a space between activity, especially at these times in the world. I am pulled to ask myself, what is the call of the time? What's our world event signaling me to do? How am I using my time? I am more and more aware that time is invoking a change. And the change being invited is not an outer change, but something inside of the self. And being quiet helps me to check in, see if I can become attuned, hear what time is invoking me to do. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and good evening to those on joined us. And good evening, Judy. And so, just a warm encouragement again. If you have questions, feel free to place them in the chat box. Anything that comes up, perhaps maybe you have been practicing yourself. And so, if you have any practical questions, so we're very lucky to have Judy, who's been studying for over 25 years, and certain she would be a wealth of experience. Would be very helpful. And so there was actually a question that came up last week, and so perhaps maybe we can bring that one up first. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be a detached observer? And if it was a perfect world, and there was no sorrow and there was just no heaviness, would being a detached observer be something relevant? Mm-hmm.
think sometimes this word detached troubles souls. And it's actually a very pure way of seeing things, a very truthful way of seeing things. It's not actually being disconnected, which is, I think, what we think of by detached, but rather that all of the filters and biases and illusions that we've become very attached to, we're detached from those. It's a very clean way. So we're able to see things very cleanly. So it's actually essential in a perfect world because it sustains that world, that way of seeing things, sustain it. But, we are very selective in these different attributes. There's times when we want detached observers, there's times when we don't. And ironically, detached observers are often that skill is connected to healing and correcting and empowering, those types of moments. So we want a doctor to have a very clear, objective sense of what's going on. We want a judge to see very clearly, be that detached or non judging observer, to see the truth. So it's being able to see in a very truthful way, to see the need of the time, what's going to move things in a benevolent direction. It's a very healing, empowering, uplifting quality to have. Again, where what I'm detaching from isn't so much anything out there. I'm not detaching from people or situations. I'm detaching from the biases and the filters and really the blindness inside. So it's a very powerful skill.
Maybe that is why detachment has such a heavy experience.
Mm.
I mean, I'm in a field where they, even just healthcare professionals use it. And they use it in a way that maybe it's connected more to disassociation. And so, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Why use the word detachment? Why not use the word objective? Why not use the word non-judgmental? I'm gonna fix the auto.
There's an interesting principle in spirituality where it almost seems like it's the exact opposite of physicality, as if we're kind of dangling upside down, and in spirituality we're put right side up. And so the word detached, I think, is quite accurate, and it might be English or different languages if you want to think that way, but the fragrance of the word is quite accurate. It's actually it is the entry point to caring or being loving. So, as an example, we love the term unconditional love. We really think that's the end all be all, unconditional love. We're not so interested in conditional love. We think unconditional love is really what's going to save the world. And what unconditional, this term unconditional, if it was in a contract, it means no conditions. It means no strings attached. So the term is actually, I think our problem is that we've put other things into it. And so we try and change the word. The word is good. It's us that's in a funny place because it really just means no strings attached, no conditions. So very clean, very pure, very clean. So it is the entry point to good things happening.
What is the relationship then between being a detached observer and one's sense of identity?
So yeah, if we turn that vision on ourselves, become a detached observer of the self, we get a chance to see a little bit more clearly who we are, and as equally important, who we are not, and kind of sort that out, get a very clear handle on the self. And then as I move through the world with that stage, I have um, a higher probability of maintaining integrity, of not being affected. So it really, we use it very much with this idea of purity, of, in fact, detachment and purity are often used interchangeably, of really being able to maintain the thing as it is and not distort or mix or be influenced. And when it comes to the self, those are pretty important dynamics to not be affected or influenced or mixed. So, very important in maintaining integrity.
What has your journey been like in terms of that experience of being a detached observer and being in the study for 25 years? When you first, I know it sounds like it's just a concept by itself, but there are many who do find they grapple with that.
It's the study is such a building block. And even during the meditation that preceded this, it was a very interesting experience because the meditation was trying to focus a lot on purity. And as I was going into the experience of purity, very naturally, it wasn't that I tried to, an incident earlier in the day came into my mind, and I could see the entire thing, my part in it, with a lot of clarity, but also free. This is the detachment of a pure peace, free of the ego and the desires and the attachments, free of all that. And then it became very clear what I needed to do for my own conscience, but also to maintain a pure relationship with the other person who was involved in this situation. It became very clear when it's not pure, when there's these other forces, mostly ego, desire, we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. We commit karmas, our conscience, it becomes very messy. So it's a really important piece of self-care to be a detached observer. That's been, I'm amazed. It's because of the purity, which is based on truth. Truth supports detached observer. So based on truth, I go into a more pure place where I can look at things and it affects decision making, which is huge. So very important in self-care.
So, truth. I know we are talking about Raja Yoga. And so, what lens, for those maybe who haven't actually practiced it yet, then what lens is it that allows them this truth, that allows them to be this observer, this detached observer?
What I love about Raj Yoga is that it assumes certain things. It has a lot of faith in the human spirit. We call it a study, that the Brahma Kumaris is a university, a place of study. But the idea, usually when we go to a school, we're kind of a empty blank slate, and then information is stuffed into us. But in this study, the feeling is that there is a knowing inside each of us, a memory, and we're simply trying to awaken it, to draw that memory out so that you will recognize the truth. You will remember the truth. It's not something we need to convince or put in there like facts or something, but that actually there's an inner knowing in every being, and we're just trying to create a safe, clear space that it can come into the light, that I can, enlighten, become aware of what I actually deep down know. Either my conscience doesn't allow me to see it, or my ego doesn't allow me. These different things that are kind of creating veils inside, trying to pull those back so that I can see what is in there to be seen or recognized or known. Um, and so, truth, because it's eternal, it's always kind of there. And one of the examples we use is that simple experience of, finding the heartbeat, the pulse of the body. It's always there. But when I actually sit quietly and become aware of it, I'm not like, so the heart isn't suddenly beating because I decided to take a pulse. It was always there, but I had to go into a particular alignment, a certain state to be able to feel what was always there. You can call it meditation if you want, but it's introverted, quiet, kind of single focus. I'm not thinking of anything else. I want to feel. So it's there. I just need to be in the right state to feel what's always there, eternal, which is what truth is.
Thank you. It certainly feels like because of these perhaps loaded experiences souls have had, what that means, it's just a practice of, um, of what it means to be soul conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a question that was from last week, since thought to just finish with that section. But it was a very full Sunday that came by. It was International Day of Yoga. It was Father's Day, summer solstice. And I think there was another.
It was National Indigenous Day in Canada. Mm-hmm.
And so, just an FYI for those who are watching, we plan to have a topic every week, and so we will send a note about that. So, since it was Father's Day yesterday, it'd be nice actually to, in terms of Raj Yoga, what father means, because that's a really big piece in the study of Raj Yoga, self transformation. So one of the things that we do cover in the course, and a big part, actually quite interesting, it's connected, Father's Day and International Day of Yoga, is this aspect of father, and what is God's role as father, because it's in many religions. I actually remember asking a soul who was of Christian background, and I said, you mention, many mention about him as father. Why? Why do we call him? Why do you call him father?" And she said, "I'm not sure why. It's never really crossed her mind." And so, not sure if it really crosses many minds what's God's function as father.
Yeah, in the course, we talk about having two fathers. And one father has a creative connection to me, and the other one, ironically, I actually created. I know that sounds strange, because I think on that day I was thinking about both fathers. So the father of me, the soul, but also what we traditionally think of as the father of the physical body, my physical father. And actually communication with both, communing with God, but also communication with the physical father. And when I commune with God the Father, I really feel He is giving me a sense of myself that has nothing to do with anything worldly, or like just such a pure sense of myself when I'm completely pristine and pure. What am I like? Very creative, really creating a sense of self. When I was talking to my physical father, it was a very interesting situation, because who we have as a physical father is not arbitrary, right? We have something we call the law of karma. So, due to my own previous activity, I land up in a certain, and every aspect of my life actually is a creation of my own past activity. So, as I was talking to my physical father, and it was very odd, I felt like I was creating him, but in a sense, healing my relationship with my own past activity. because what it was, that conversation was recognizing his greatness, whereas with God, he helps me to recognize my greatness. The conversations we have with our physical father on that day is we're thanking them for, you were this and you were that. And I'm really talking about myself because it's my past karma that, and one of the qualities I actually was recognizing in the physical father, which I told him has been so, so crucial in the spiritual study, is he really taught us to not try to understand things in a superficial way, to really try and go deeply and reflect on things and get to the seed of things. So I was remembering, particularly in the Jewish faith, we call them high holidays. Passover is one of them. And there is a book, it's like a manual that you celebrate the evening with, the Haggadah, and it tells you, you do this and then you do that, and you just work your way and repeat things, and everyone has their part. The youngest one sings this, and he never did it that way. He had his own. He always had his own version of the Haggadah. It had his own notations in it. So when we set the table, we had to make sure he got his. It's not you could give anyone. Everyone had their own, and his was very special because it had. And his notations was about. He would skip over things. He only wanted to focus on what he felt was very important and provoked thought. To not take it on a sufris, or shall we say even ritual. And this has been such a key quality in the spiritual study, to not be satisfied just having the thought, I'm a soul, but go deeply into the significance of it. And so I was just thanking him. And as I'm thanking him, I'm realizing that I landed up with the Father like that because it's something important to me, the soul. So I created, if you will, that kind of parent. I know it sounds funny. So one is the spiritual father gives me a deep, deep sense of self. But in the other one, I'm really recognizing what I myself create through the physical father, through having that particular physical father. So that was also a very beautiful conversation where, in celebrating my physical father's specialities, we also get a sense of our own specialities too. So that was Father's Day for me.
It's interesting that Raja Yoga, the first course, is always soul consciousness.
Mm.
So why? Why consider myself to be a soul if I want to get these specialities from our spiritual father?
We have these two options we look at, soul consciousness and body consciousness. And it's like two different paradigms. And it's carved in stone, really. It's going to happen that if I'm in this paradigm, I will only have access to certain, only capable of understanding certain information. Right? It's like being in a box, and there could be lots of things outside of the box going on, but with that paradigm of thinking I'm the body, it's as if my understanding, it's kind of strange, it's only limited to really, really getting, I'm not talking about intellectual or theoretical exercises, to a reality that I can only experience certain things when I'm in soul consciousness. And it's funny, one of the tests that I get when at the annual eye exam. It's a peripheral vision test. I don't know, perhaps you've done, where you have to look at a dot, but you have to click if you see these other dots. Start, am I imagining things? But it's so interesting that they're very stern. They say you must stay looking at that dot, right? And then let's see what else you can see around there, right? So such a sense of, this is body consciousness. If I am focused on this sense, this experience of myself in such a physical way, it's like I'm missing lots of information, missing a lot of information. I just simply am incapable. We call it your third eye is closed. I'm incapable. Even if I have the thoughts, I'm incapable of feeling them, actually, as long as I think I'm the body. So the minute that we could say open the third eye, the minute I shift paradigms and genuinely, and this is the trick, genuinely go into the experience, I am a soul and this is my body. It's like this whole world opens up. Stuff that was always there, it's just invisible. It's not physical, but it was always there. Suddenly it's so clear. It's so clear. So I'm remembering a little bit about a student that we're recognizing this month, got the name Mama. And Mama went very deeply into soul consciousness, went into that other paradigm completely, 100%. And what she was then able to perceive or experience was so deep. There were souls around her that were having all sorts of other, interesting experiences, trance and visions, and she would be the one who would explain them to them, even though they had them, they didn't understand, right? They couldn't really see what they had just seen, if you will. And she would be the one who would explain the significance because her vision, her capacity to understand was so deep simply by considering herself to be a soul. It's got nothing to do with worldly cleverness or ego. It's purity and the sensitivity awakening in the soul when I go into that highest level of detachment or freedom called soul consciousness. My vision, it's remarkable what we can then understand and experience. So the biggest experience is of being a child of God, and not just in words or in prayer or hopes, but as a reality. That reality can only awaken, I can only experience it if I'm soul conscious.
It feels like it comes full circle to a question that came up maybe a couple of weeks ago about, because it's something I think many of us have observed, and perhaps comments have come up in the Raja Yoga courses about just imagining myself as a point of light, or just picturing a point of light in the center of my forehead. But the feeling from what I'm hearing from you sharing, soul consciousness is a whole world, a reality I want to live in. And
and again, thinking about Mama, because of being soul conscious, the knowledge that she was working with, which we consider to be from God, she embodied. And this is where it falls apart for souls. They say, yeah, I am a soul, I'm soul. But then they experience this difficulty and that challenge, things that they it's not that that stuff would go away, but they would experience it very differently if they had really gone into soul consciousness because of the capacities it awakens. So the biggest example really was Mama, who, she developed cancer, and the day that she is going to leave the body, and probably is fully aware that she is, her activity, I don't think it's like anybody else who's ever who's ever passed away. It's the same with Brahma. She's giving out grapes in the morning. If you saw the picture of her, you would be shocked. She's fully aware that she is going to leave the body. We call it die, but leave the body. She's fully aware. But the fact that she is a soul was so real to her. At that point, you can't fake it. It was so real. She embodied all of the knowledge that is connected to being soul conscious. And it was demonstrated in her presence, her reality, the way she really was. She was authentically soul conscious. So that's where people have to look honest. If I was soul conscious, I would be able to take in all the information around spirituality, and it would show up in my day-to-day life, and I would experience things in a very different way. Oh, and I just will add, relative to God, that when we're soul conscious, we don't cry out to God. We don't pray to God. We don't, God help me. That as a child of God, it just doesn't happen if I'm soul conscious. It's a very different relationship with God.
It feels like this is an essential conversation we always need to have. And we kind of touched on it before, but it does feel like it's something that's really important. There's no point in going further in Raja Yoga. Is that how does one become more authentic in their practice of soul consciousness?
Mm. Unfortunately, I wish we could give you a technical method. It's really up to each individual whether or not they do. That's unfortunately the bottom line. They could listen to all the classes they want. They could
Well,
surround
maybe that's what they
themselves
want to
with.
hear. Okay, I don't want to sit there and just listen to classes all day.
Yeah,
Your experience, you, the one we are
I will.
interviewing.
Yeah, I will give. I will give the example again in fitness because yeah, you walk into a fitness class and you'll notice there's one instructor, but such a variety executing the exercise, even though it's one, everyone's been given the same exercise, but everyone's executing it very differently and they're all getting the same corrections and they're all getting the same information. Why is there such variety in the execution? And even if I was to give everyone the same, tips, there is still going to be variety
True.
because it's a very internal choice. It's a very internal thing. So all we can do is, I think that was something that Brahma did well and Mama did well. Wasn't so much what they said through their mouth, but the very subtle support through their attitude and their vision and their vibration. I heard someone once say something very beautiful about being a manager, a leader. They said you can't control people. They're going to do what you can do. The best you can do is create an environment where they feel safe and supported and empowered, an environment that brings out the best. That's really all we can do for each other and even for ourselves, I suppose. But that's really, I think, what Brahma and Mama did is through these subtle capacities, vibration, they created an environment in which souls did their best. But within that, there will be variety.
Well, thank you for trying to answer these
Yeah,
high pressured questions.
that's all right. It's probably better answers, but
well, we can always harass you about them in the next sessions. And so we notice the soul has joined, and I know we're coming close to the end, but if souls have any questions at all, please enter them into the chat box. And once
or if
again,
there's any themes that you want us to explore in the future, please let us know.
And so we'll give it a second in case there's anything that comes up in the chat box. Otherwise, perhaps maybe it's nice to go into an experience.
It's very interesting. Tomorrow is Mama's Day. And that's the day the soul we were talking about, Mama, the number 2 student of the Brahma Kumaris behind Brahma. As mentioned, she did develop cancer and she left the body. Some say 45, 46, so mid 40s, she left the body due to cancer in 1965. And this is a day, actually the whole month, but tomorrow is the day which it happened, the 24th June, where we particularly remember her example. So maybe I think one of the most powerful is her depth of spirituality, of soul consciousness, which led to a remarkable level of self-respect and spiritual leadership. So perhaps we can go into that, following that kind of legacy in this reflection. Within each of us is remarkable spiritual capacity. every once in a while, perhaps in extreme situations, we get a glimpse of it and call it a random act of kindness or the greatness of the human spirit. It is within each of us. But as long as we remain mired in physicality, in temporariness, which leads to insecurity, worry, stress, fear, complication, we're too distracted to cultivate the greatness within the self. These quiet moments inside are like becoming a gardener of the self, going to the very seed of who I am. So there's not a single thought about worldly activity, just the seed of who I am, this eternal being, this traveler through time, nothing to do with the body, me, the one thinking, reflecting, feeling, this tiny seed that is me, watering that seed of the self with attention, with letting go, with simplicity, honesty, and that seed of self begins to grow in the sense I become more real to myself. I, the soul, realizing I am the soul inside. And somehow all the worldly activity seems so much less important than just realizing myself. If I can care for that seed, that sense of myself as a soul, it will grow into a life of virtues, of beauty. All the spiritual capacity will blossom, as we saw in the life of Mama. Om Shanti.
Shanti, thank you to those who've joined us on live stream. Om Shanti. And so thank you, Judy, as well. And so once again, we will be having a theme. Once a week, we'll experiment with that. So for those who have any themes that they are, or just questions, again, you can certainly email the center ahead of time, and we'll certainly would like to take up those themes as well. And so I'm going to pass it over to Judy right now with any remaining reminders of future sessions, and I will float back there.
Right. There's some technical. So I'm here just to distract you. That's the technical bit. So our next public programming will be Thursday evening. Experience 6:45 to 7:30 p.m. And then again, same time slot, 7:35 to 8:15 p.m. on Thursdays. We have Raj Yoga Essentials. So this is the opportunity to go more deeply. And some people say it's repeating, and I have no problem repeating. I'm so inspired by Brahma Baba. He had no problem repeating either. So, and it seemed quite effective for him, quite successful. So that's exactly, it seems, what we need to do. When someone has amnesia, you have to keep repeating until they come out of that amnesia. So that's Thursday evening. And again, as always, on Saturdays, we have 1 o'clock experience to 1:45, and then 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. We have inner fitness. And I believe our theme this weekend is flexibility. I could be making that up. So hopefully you'll be flexible on that. But thank you for joining tonight. Such a pleasure to have you. Lovely that you have this interest. It's very beautiful. Until we meet again. Om Shanti.